So let's jump right into a huge question. What does it actually mean to be a good person? I mean, we throw around words like right and wrong all the time, but have you ever really stopped to think about who's truly responsible when something happens? Let's break it down. And really, think about this for a second. When you're judging something that someone did, what do you weigh more heavily? The intention they had or what actually happened? Is morality about a single action in a single moment? Or is it about who a person is, their character, built up over a lifetime? That's really the core of what we're going to unpack today. All right, here's our game plan. First, we'll figure out what a moral person even is. Then, we'll get into the difference between the doers and the receivers of actions. After that, we'll look at what makes someone accountable, when they might get a pass, and finally, we'll bring it all home to you and the power of your choices.
Okay, first up, who is a moral person? Because before we can even start talking about right and wrong actions, we have to know who we're even talking about. I mean, a rock that rolls down a hill isn't evil, right? But the person who pushed it, well, they might be. So what's the actual difference here?
It's pretty simple, actually. A moral person is just any being that has what we call moral status. And that's a powerful idea. It basically means it's anyone or anything whose well-being matters in a moral sense. You know, their welfare, their dignity, it has to be part of the equation. In short, they matter.
So what does having moral status really boil down to? One absolutely essential thing: rights. To be a moral person, at the very minimum, means you have moral rights. That's your ticket into the moral community. Now, duties, that's a whole other thing. And as we'll see, not everyone has those.
All right, let's move on. This is where things get really interesting, because we need to draw a super important line between the doers and the receivers in the moral world.
So you've got two sides to this coin. On one side, you have moral agents. These are the doers. They're the ones who perform actions we can judge, they have duties, and they can be held responsible. Then on the other side, you have moral patients. They're the receivers. Actions are done to them, they have rights, and they're the ones we are morally concerned about. So who are we talking about here? Let's make it concrete. Moral agents are typically normal, functioning human adults who can reason and make free choices. But the moral patients group is much bigger. It includes human infants, people with profound cognitive disabilities, and even some animals. They can't be held accountable for duties, but that doesn't for a second mean they don't have rights. They absolutely do. And that right there is the big idea to take away from this section. The group of beings who have rights, the patients, is way bigger than the group of beings who also have duties, the agents. It's a fundamental point. Every moral person's rights must be respected, even if they don't have the capacity to take on responsibilities themselves. This leads us right into our next big question. Now that we've identified the moral agents, the doers, what is it that actually makes them responsible for what they do? You know, we talk about accountability all the time, but what is it really? It's simply whether someone deserves praise or blame for what they did. And notice, it goes both ways. It's not just about punishment. And this whole concept comes directly from our ability to think rationally and to choose freely.
So, how do we know if someone is truly on the hook? Well, it turns out there's a kind of three-part test. And for someone to be accountable, all three of these boxes have to be checked. First, agency. Did you actually do it? Second, knowledge. Did you have any idea it was right or wrong? And third, intentionality. Was it your free choice? You need all three.
Which, of course, brings up the next logical question. What if one of those boxes is left unchecked? Is the person still responsible?
And that brings us right here to Section 4. When do we get a pass? Because accountability isn't always black and white. There are some very specific situations that can get someone off the hook, and we need to understand them to be fair. The things that excuse you, well, they're basically the exact opposite of that three-part test we just talked about. Either you weren't the one who did it, you were forced to do it, or you simply didn't know it was wrong. Now, the first two are pretty straightforward, but that last one, ignorance, that's where it gets really tricky. See, it turns out not all ignorance is created equal. On one hand, you have blameless ignorance. This is when you genuinely couldn't have been expected to know any better. That can get you off the hook. But then you have blameful ignorance, and that's a whole different story. That's when you really could have and should have known better. That is not an excuse. In fact, it's its own kind of moral failure. And to make this crystal clear, the source material gives a really powerful and very heavy example. The argument presented is that even if some individuals sincerely believe they were doing the right thing during horrific events, That ignorance isn't an excuse. Why? Because they could have known better, and they should have known better. That failure to question, to seek the truth, is what's called moral negligence.
Okay, let's bring this all home. This is all about you. Because these big ideas about agents, accountability, and excuses, they don't just apply to history books. They apply to our choices, our actions, and our lives every single day.
So here's the thing that ties it all together. Being a moral agent isn't something you're just born with. It's something you become. It's a journey. Responsibility is something we grow into, and that growth is fueled by our choices. Our moral thinking actually evolves over time in stages, moving from a really simple focus on ourselves to a much deeper understanding of big ideas like justice.
I mean, think about how we learn this stuff as kids. At first, it's all about avoiding punishment, right? Don't do that or you'll get a timeout. That's stage one. Then maybe you get to a you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours kind of view. Later, it becomes about fitting in, following the rules of society. And a lot of us stay there. But the journey can go further. The highest stages are about a deep commitment to universal principles, justice, dignity, equality, even if that means you have to question the rules. You see, maturity and morality is about moving from a fear of punishment to a love of justice. And every small daily choice we make is a step on that path, building the habits that literally form our character.
So at the end of the day, it all comes down to this. The final question isn't for me to answer. It's for you. As a moral agent, with the ability to know and the freedom to choose, how are you going to use that freedom to become the person you know you ought to be? Thanks for digging into this with me.